Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning into the YouTube channel, LinkedIn podcast. I have one of my closest friends, Edwin Aristor here, who's just the jolliest guy with a $1 billion laugh and a smile, and he looks good. Like, dude looks shredded. Like, life is good, man. Glad to be with you. Welcome, Edwin.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Davidson. I think this is what, round two on the
Oh,
podcast. So excited to be on the second part of this journey with your podcast.
yeah, yeah. I'll post a link to the first episode, but yeah, Edwin and I know each other through Landmark, which is this amazing life coaching, self-development community, and have stayed in touch since. And I witnessed you, become a father, your healing journey, you just being able to, just seeing how you inspire and take care of all the mentees around you, and just the level of depth that of relationships you have with people. It's amazing to watch you grow, man.
No, thank you so much. It's been quite a journey from a healing perspective, from the personal development perspective, events that we've joined together, therapy, coaching, my own spiritual practice. So it's been kind of a whirlwind. I'm still on that journey. I'm still learning to love myself, love others, love my community. But it's been a beautiful journey so far.
Mm. And also for those of you who haven't seen Edwin lately, because we're in this weird virtual world that's like half, things are kind of like back to normal, right? But a lot of people have moved, and obviously people have kids now, and there's just been a lot of changes. But the dude is like 5% body fat now, for those of you guys who can't tell through that. But yeah, he's just shredded, just insane.
No, too funny. Funny enough, so I've actually lost about maybe 15 to 20 pounds since the pandemic. Just watching a lot of really great movies around just health and wellness. I kind of follow a couple of like keto and paleo principles, but listen, I still love bread. I still love pizza from time to time. But I try to just take really stock of my health, especially with the pandemic and COVID. I'm just making sure I have a strong metabolic health, making sure my immune system is really good. I haven't joined the gym. It's more with a lot of personal workouts. Kettlebell workouts are some of my favorite body weight workouts. Going running, I picked up flag
Mm.
rugby with a dad's group in Harlem, which has been really, really awesome. During the
Wow.
summertime where I was doing a lot of running, never
Mm.
really played rugby in my life, but it was something I kind of picked up naturally, and it's
Huh.
something I actually want to play a little bit more come next fall or next summer. So I've just
Mm.
been really taking stock of my health, especially in the midst of the pandemic.
What I admire about you, other than your stunning good looks, obviously,
Making me blush.
is just like the well balanced life that you have. I would say it's very rare to see men that, it seems like, from my perspective and from knowing you personally, that you do, you make time to be a good father, and then you have your career is in a good place, and you give back, and there's just so much that you do. So yeah, would love to learn, like, maybe pull on some of the threads, and just dig a little bit deeper on how you're able to have such a well balanced life.
Yeah, no, that's really observant of you, Davidson. I'll say a couple of things that come to mind. And funny enough, I had a really great Reiki session, which is more around energy healing. And from what the healer and the Reiki instructor kind of shared, it was like my heart's very expansive.
Mm,
And I think that's something that allows me to find the balance when it comes to health and wellness with family, with friends, with my own spirituality. And I think kind of
mm,
stems from just as like for me, the biggest journey has been asking for help and having being very vulnerable. So my
yeah.
wife is phenomenal. I'm having an amazing son. He just turned two weeks ago. So him,
Aw,
Michelle, is just an amazing
congratulations.
person.
Yeah.
But willing to ask for help. So whereas like, hey,
Mm,
I told my partner, listen, I would love to participate in this rugby league on Wednesdays from 7 to 10 o'clock. Can you allow me the space to make sure I can
mm,
participate and making sure I kind of pay it forward to make sure she has space for her own activities. So that's just an
mm,
example of like being open, being vulnerable, compromising, and asking for support in the relationship.
mm,
Making sure that I prioritize my family. My mother, she was recently diagnosed with dementia not too long ago. So making sure that we have the whole family on deck where I provide support here I like my brothers, my
Mm,
sister-in-law, my wife to kind of provide that support. So I think it takes
yeah.
a village. So yes, I
Huh.
prioritize my spirituality, my health and wellness, my fitness, my work, but making sure I have a community to support me in that endeavor.
Hmm. And I know I'm sure that was a relatively newer, like that's something that you've grown to be get better at, right? I'm sure in the beginning you thought you had to do it on your own, and then over time you were able to, be a bit more vulnerable and be like, hey, like I can't, would you be able to? So how did that happen? Was that a practice that you just worked with your coach on and things like that?
Yeah, dude, it's an everyday challenge for me. Like I said, I've
Yeah.
done coaching, therapy, landmark, momentum, next level, summit of greatness. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for me. You know, one of the things that of the feedback I've received, the way people experience me is like looking good, having my shit together. Sometimes I can come across arrogant, and that caused a lot of issues, and it didn't really work
Uh,
for my relationships with my colleagues, my friends, my
mm,
family. So one thing that I went through my couples therapist that you really hit home is that vulnerability begets vulnerability. The more
mm,
vulnerable that you are, the more vulnerable people are going to be around you. And I
mm,
think when I opened up my heart and stop just
mm,
thinking with my head, like vulnerability is actually power. There's strength in
mm,
vulnerability because people are more likely to connect with you. People are more
mm,
likely to understand you. People are more likely to
mm,
open up with their own challenges and their struggles. And the more vulnerable I've been, it's almost like a muscle that is getting
mm,
stronger and stronger. But for a really long time, I was not vulnerable. I saw vulnerability
mm.
as weakness, as someone's going to try to get something over me. They're going to use it against me. And
Ah,
that just didn't work in prior relationships. But the more
huh,
vulnerable I've been with my partner, people like yourself, my community, with my clients, it's opened
mm.
up a new role for me. And that's something I'm still practicing day in and day out.
Yeah, I love that's a good point. I remember when you called me and then you were like getting my feedback, and I was like, holy crap, like my jaw literally dropped. Like I was like, oh my God, Edwin's like calling, like usually I'm so used to the other way, 99% of the time is the other way around, right? So yeah, I it really blew my mind, and I was just so happy that you did that. It really does make a difference, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
Um And so clearly you've done like, Momentum, Landmark, Tony Robb, all these different things, right? And I'm sure they all have different chapter. Like what compels you to, because I think people reach a certain age, like maybe it's like when they have a kid or whatever it is, right? And they stop. They're like, yeah, that was like what I did in my 20s, right? But what compels you to continuously seek that next level and that next layer, even though many people, might be like, why are you so into that stuff?
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes I joke, and I've gotten this feedback. I'm like a personal development junkie. But I think a couple of things that stand out. One is continuous learning. Like I want to continue to
Yeah.
learn about myself to become a better human being. And if I'm a better human being, then I become a better father, a better husband, a better son, a better brother, a better friend. And I think for me, it's just the feedback that I get from friends like yourself and from my wife, are like, hey, how am I showing up? Like, what is your experience of
Mm,
me? Like, how am I coming up in this relationship? Am I open? Am I closed off? Am I being vulnerable? Am I being a jerk? So I think when I get that
mm.
feedback, it gets me to think about, hey, how can I show up to be a better person? And how can I show up to love myself more? And the more I
Mm,
love myself, the more I can love others. And I think
mm,
that's where it kind of starts with when it comes to me and just seeing the way I've evolved, the way
mm,
you've evolved, the way other people in my relationship have evolved. So I think that's been one of the key ahas and key like takeaways for me is like how can I
mm.
become a better human being?
It's mentioned you mentioned self-love, but I guess from my perspective, or at least since I've met you, it always seemed like from the outside that you always loved yourself though, right? Like it didn't seem like I feel like for me, like that's certainly not my experience of
Mhm.
myself where I probably have only started loving myself recently, right? Maybe in the last 2.5 years or so. But it just from ever since the day I met you, it does seem like you love yourself, right? Or is that just from the outside looking in, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a combination of both. Like, yes, I do have a deep love for myself, but then I also have a lot of demons and issues and challenges. I know I shared with
Mm.
you that I've been on a kind of alcohol fast. So for
Oh,
about
yeah.
30 to 45 days, no, I was not drinking. And I had to like kind of
Mm,
reevaluate my relationship with alcohol, where a lot
mm,
of the poor decisions I've made in the past usually was surrounded by alcohol. But then it's
Right.
not the alcohol itself, it's understanding like the emotions behind it. And I
Mm,
think for me, the anxiety and stress of a stressful job, some of the things that's happening with my family, some of the issues that I was going through, I think a
mm,
lot was with how was I managing stress, and the way I was managing was with alcohol, where it kind of
mm,
numbs you at a certain point. We're like, oh, I'm not feeling these emotions, but after the
mm,
fact, it comes back tenfold. So
mm,
I think I started to look at my relationship with alcohol. Over the past maybe month or two, I've had a couple of drinks, went to a wedding. My wife and I celebrated our 3-year anniversary, so we celebrated
oh,
with champagne.
congratulations.
So I think for me, it was around I'm in control. Hey, I can have a
Mm,
drink or two and enjoy the moment versus where
mm,
I was not pacing myself. I would have maybe
mm,
4 to 5 drinks in alcohol in
mm,
an hour, where typically you want to have 4 to 5 drinks in an evening. So when I
mm,
started reevaluating where my stresses were like, hey, I'm feeling really stressed, be
mm,
in that stress, understanding what's stressing you out. Is it work? Is it family? Is it what happened with my child? So when I
mm,
started understanding my stressors, then I was like, hey, I don't need to numb myself with alcohol.
mm,
Let me meditate. Let me journal. Let me talk to my wife. Let me talk to my friends and family about what's going on with me. And I use that as a pivot and a reframe to look at, hey, I have other outlets rather than having, going to the bar, having the happy hour, taking the shots. Well, I'll feel
mm,
the emotions later, but in that moment, I'm numb to it. So I think for me,
mm,
it's just really being in tune with my emotions. And I think that's
mm,
been really, really helpful over the past couple of months. And just the journey over the past couple of years from the
mm.
programs, from the coaching, and from the therapy.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you're implementing everything, right? As we have done many of these programs together, and think, we've been very kind enough to share the work with each other, right? So I just want to acknowledge you for actually implementing it, right? Because learning it is one thing, but actually applying it, despite the discomfort, despite the that magnifying glass on yourself, despite the vulnerability, you continue to show up and you continue to be intentional, right, about implementing it in various aspects of your life. So just want to
Yeah.
acknowledge you for that.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. I mean, I'm also part of a men's group called the Dudes of Disruption. And when I think about like one of the key tenets is around sharing, what it
Mm,
means to be a man, no contribution. And when it comes to sharing, like I had to be uncomfortable getting messy. And messy
yeah.
means like having that uncomfortable conversation with myself, with my
Mm,
partners, with my friends, with
mm,
clients. I think when you start having those uncomfortable conversations, that's where the growth starts happening. When
mm,
you're being authentic of your feelings and what's happening in that situation, and just being open that, hey, you might not like the feedback, or the person might not like the feedback themselves, being okay having that conversation. So at least you know where you
mm,
stand and you're authentic rather than hiding, rather than
mm,
BSing that person. And I think that's where a lot of the growth has been happening in my own personal relationships or with other relations that I have other men are having within the group. So I
mm,
think just getting messy, being authentic,
mm,
being honest, being vulnerable, being humble, I think have been some key tenets, and just being in
mm.
integrity with myself and in my word.
Yeah, I love that, right? It's integrity is not something that I guess people outside of the personal development
The
realm
work.
really use in everyday life, right? Or at least it has a different meaning. It's more of more morals, I would say, as opposed to like our actions and our words being in alignment. Um, I love what you said. What you just shared earlier kind of reminded me of so Ian Koniak is one of my coaches, and we talked about my addiction with food, right? And it's interesting because and I just spoke to a financial therapist today, and she said that the reason why I eat food is because I have control over in that moment. I get to control and be able to like, and I usually overeat when I have a bad day. Like I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
like I'm stressed, like let me just go eat like a rack of ribs or something. And in that moment I'm in control because I get to eat the ribs, and I'm happy for like 5 minutes, right? And then afterwards I'm like, oh man, I overate. Then I go into like the cycle. But yeah, and then it sounds like in your case it was alcohol, and then I've done that as well, right? Where I'm like, I do the alcohol because my perception of it, and thank you for recommending the Naked Mind, like that. You actually helped me go cold turkey in terms of
Hmm.
like all drugs, all hard drugs, like
Hmm.
forever. So So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And more specific to alcohol, I noticed like the reason why I do drink alcohol sometimes is because like I'm bored, right? And
Mhm.
when I'm bored, I think my mind kind of talks about, oh, I gotta like, think about paying the mortgage. I gotta plan for kids' retire, blah blah blah, my retirement. And then when I'm drinking, I'm not thinking anymore, right?
Mhm.
So it's just interesting how you help me be able to just be much more intentional and more conscious. I think is a word that makes the most sense here in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so fun. Like I know we joke about like you're being my doppelganger, like we're doppelgangers to each other. So I
Mm,
realize that when I get stressed, I also stress eat, but it's
mm,
around sweets. So I'll
uh,
like have a cake, pie, some tart. Like I realize like, wait, I'm stressed out. And if I'm not drinking, I end up going. So there's this awesome bakery in Harlem called Cake Lord, like black owned. And I notice like I'm going to get like, cheesecake, red velvet cake, carrot
yeah,
cake, and I like it feels good in that moment because it was like
mm,
comfort food, and I'm
yeah,
kind of conscious to the fact that I am stress eating, so I'm replacing
mm,
kind of with one vice with another vice. So
mm,
that's something I'm currently working through myself. Is just like, hey, I'm feeling a little stressed about work or feeling stressed about family. Let me go get
mm,
something sweet because I'm in control. It makes me feel good, but it's not
mm,
healthy for me. So I think
mm,
that's something I'm still in my own journey of like, how can I manage my stress? Like, yes, I would
mm.
love to be in an ashram and meditate for like 12 hours and not deal with
Right.
anything, but we're living in this world right now. So I got to be more conscious of my decisions.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned sweets. I certainly I think ice cream is my vice. Like I have like at any given time you open the fridge, there's like six different flavors of ice cream. So it'll be like today I'm feeling like Earl Grey ice cream, and I think
Mhm.
everything in moderation, right? Obviously, if I'm doing it, because I think I think we're both somewhat perfectionists in some ways, right? I think I'm a perfectionist in the sense that like I sometimes I beat myself up even though I'm just eating ice cream once a week, and then I think that's unhealthy where I'm like that much of a stickler where I'm just like it's like, dude, like live a little, you know? So I think
Mhm.
I've learned to kind of be much more with Ian has helped me be much kinder to myself because
Mhm.
he's like, oh, in your intake form, you talked about like drugs and this and alcohol and blah blah blah. And then he's like, do you still do that? I was like, oh, like, I'll drink like maybe 8 drinks a month. And he's like, that's not that bad. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this is terrible. And he's like, dude,
Yeah.
like just get you like you're being really hard on yourself. Like
Mhm.
it's like when you talk about it, it makes me think that you're drinking like a drink every day. And I'm like, no, like 1 or 2 drinks a week. And he's like, dude,
Mhm.
like be kind, like give yourself some grace, man. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I didn't even realize I was beating myself up like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. So I finished reading Ram Dass, Be Here Now. And thank you for the recommendation. It's like I'm on my
Mm,
own journey. I'm into my own spirituality and different books. And two key takeaways is around be here now, meaning being present and being
mm,
loving awareness. And I think loving
mm,
awareness, yes, for the outside world, but I think for ourselves personally, and for me,
mm,
is like giving myself grace, giving myself
mm,
kindness, giving myself love. Then, oh, yes, a lot of the things in the past has affected me, quote unquote, now, but it's happened in the
mm,
past. It's not happening right now. So how am I going to
mm,
respond? How am I going to react to better decisions? How am I going to be
mm,
react better to loving myself and giving myself grace for my past? Because it was
mm,
all great in terms of helping me learn. It was perfect in the sense that it happened. I've learned from it. What can I do
mm,
better? How can I be a more wiseful person now? And then how can I
mm,
share some of my challenges with others who are going through their own challenges and say, hey, this is not my advice. This is what I went through, and hopefully it can help
mm,
you in your own journey when you make better decisions or make changes for your life. So I think those
mm,
two takeaways, just like being really present and loving yourself, and it's going to help you love others.
mm. Yeah, and just hearing you reflect that takeaway from Be Here Now, I realized like I've been such an amazing husband to Sammy, and yet I still am holding on to like the 5 years or year 6 and 7 when I wasn't there. And it's like, dude, like the last couple years, I've been such an amazing husband. Like, let it go. So even in that, I hear that like I could be kinder to myself. Because when I ask her, she's like, no, like you're an amazing, like she's always like, I'm so lucky to have you, right? But I'm still fixated on like 4 or 5 years ago when she's expressed some disappointments. And like with any other couple, right? There's always, times where I slip up and like I could be a little bit more present or whatever it is, right? But overall, I would say like that's improved significantly.
Yeah, it's so funny because I think I saw a couple statistics about like what women are looking for when it comes to dating right now. And I think the number
Oh yeah.
one was around emotional intelligence slash
Mm,
emotional availability. And I think, a lot of, the female friends that I have right now talking about some of the
mm,
challenges when it comes to dating is around the guys are just not emotionally available. Yes, they may have a
huh,
great job, may be financially stable, but if they're not in tune with
mm,
their emotions, there's going to be a lack of in-depth, connection with that individual. And I think coming from
mm,
the Chris Lee event over at the Summit of Greatness is around that intimacy. And I think not only both men and women are looking for more intimacy. So when I look at my
mm,
own relationship, we have strong physical intimacy, but what about the emotional? What about the spiritual? What about the
mm,
artistic? So finding other modes of intimacy, I think that's what allows deeper connection. And that's the
mm,
own journey that I'm working on day in and day out.
hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And another takeaway from our conversations is like you helped me be able to actually improve my testosterone levels as well through some of the practices and pot and stuff that you let me listen to and kind of consume. And I do feel much better. Like I feel much more confident. Like yeah, it makes a world of a difference. And also normalizing that too, because that's not a conversation that many men have out in the open. So I do appreciate you, kind of sharing your journey and how, and clearly, I see the difference, and I'm sure everyone sees the difference in you. And so, yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think one of the key things around health and wellness, there's an African proverb, so hopefully I'm not butchering it, is, pay the farmer now or pay the doctor later. So I think a
Mm,
lot of the things that we've been going through in this past couple of years in the pandemic is really taking stock of our health, not only our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, our financial health. So when it came to
mm,
me, it's like, what are the foods that I'm putting into my body? Am I listening to my body in terms of the food that I'm taking in? So making sure I'm eating, clean meat, great fish, vegetables, good fats. I love fruit, eating more fruit in my diet. Like I started seeing a shift in my body when I started,
mm,
implementing better foods, as well as working out, and then taking stock of my spiritual health as well. And then I start to see more of that balance in my life. I'm still
mm,
working through it. I'm still looking to get deeper into my faith, deeper into
mm.
my health, getting more financially fit because we're about to hit this recession. So making sure
Yeah.
that we're paying off debt, making sure that we make as much money as possible so we can weather the storm with this upcoming
Mm,
recession. So I think when it comes to health, it's all facets of it.
mm. Yeah, yeah, and spirituality is something that people don't really talk about as much too, right? Obviously, in the New York City area, everyone's focused on the financial and the career stuff, but that's something that I'm also exploring with Ian and about my spiritual practice as well, right? And I do think people that are like agnostic like myself, we all can have all the success we want, win all the awards at LinkedIn or Gartner or wherever else, right? But if we don't have like a strong spiritual grounding practice, then sometimes we feel like we have like an existential crisis.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I was raised Catholic. I still practice the Catholic faith. But the way I kind of like the terminology here, like, I'm spiritual, not religious. I think for me, I'm religious and spiritual, meaning I
Mm,
have my own personal relationship with God, but also I love to learn about different practices when it comes to Buddhism,
mm,
people who practice Catholicism, Christian, Islam. I'm learning about different faiths. And funny enough, it actually strengthens my own faith because it allows me to connect with other people to
mm,
understand their practice, to understand like what compels them. And I
mm,
think, over the past, 2 years, with my meditation practice, going back to
mm,
church, learning to love myself and others, it's allowed me to be deeper with my own spirituality, but also
mm,
strengthen my own religious background when it comes to
mm,
church. So I think I'm also on my own journey, learning from others, but also having that Christ consciousness, like being of service, loving others,
mm,
taking care of my family, taking care of my community. I think
mm,
that's the Christ consciousness that I'm,
mm.
experiencing in my faith on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think you introduced me to iMentor, and actually that was one of the things that actually increased my spiritual practice, believe it or not. Because I think, like you said, when you give and you're being of service, right, not expecting anything in return, it really just helps me stay connected to the God, universe, you mentioned meditation as well. That's also a really big practice for me that has helped me. When I do the Tony Robbins priming in the mornings and stuff like that, I feel very connected to the universe. And I'd say like when I'm in nature, I feel very, very spiritual as well, where I just feel very at one and very connected to the universe. So,
It's so interesting. So I joined a webinar around Ram Dass, and this topic was around nature. And I feel so
mm,
disconnected to nature, being in
mm,
Manhattan, having a
mm.
car, driving around, where I
Oh,
haven't really been, hiking probably in the past couple of years. So
mm,
over the past weekend, I went apple picking over upstate with my son and my wife. And it was such a
oh,
beautiful experience to see like God, the source, the universe, to see how beautiful
mm,
nature is. And it
yeah.
allowed me to say, hey, listen, there's such a vast, beautiful world. And sometimes we
Mm,
need to kind of pause and just look around and see the
mm,
beauty in nature, picking
mm,
up the apples, seeing the skyline, seeing, the mountains, the trees. It was such a beautiful experience. And I
mm,
think that's something I want to get connected deeper to
mm.
is nature. I
Yeah.
know a couple of friends I've met who say they've had, beautiful experiences leveraging plant medicine, being in
Oh, yeah.
nature and getting, the source, talking to them directly. So I think that's
Mm,
something I'm looking to explore as well. Like, how can I get
yeah.
deeper with nature? Because I think we're so
Mm.
disconnected being in the concrete jungle of New York City.
That's so true. Yeah, you're right. The plant medicine certainly amplifies my connection with nature, and when I combine the two powerfully and integrate nature and plant medicine, it humbles you, right? Like the ego dissolves so much, and it has lasting effects, like years and years later, like permanent effects. So yeah, I would say I've certainly leveraged plant medicine to really integrate into nature, and yeah, it's how I think that was actually the origin, and that was what helped me build my spiritual practice, because I just felt like, every time I did it, it was like in a bamboo forest or in a
Mhm.
national park, or there was always some component of like being in nature, being in the rivers, being in the mountains, and that helped me really feel connected to the universe. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Man, good stuff. I feel like we've talked about some pretty deep topics.
It's always a pleasure connecting with you, Davidson.
Yeah, well, I just wanna like acknowledge you for just your vulnerability, you actually asking for help, being so willing to share authentically, whether it's in the men's group with the fellas, you're such a contribution there. You're always everyone's go-to person, like when they call you, whenever there's a breakdown or whenever they want to get a second opinion, because of your wisdom and the space that you hold for others. And yeah, just thank you for our friendship, man. It's beautiful to cross paths with you, and just to see both of us grow is magical. So thank you.
No, thank you, Davidson. I always like I know we joke, but I always say that you're an actual inspiration because the way you kind of show up in the world, you were a super connector, during the Summit of Greatness. You were just so open with your heart and you connected with so many other people and you brought people into our group. Some of the late night conversations that we had were just
Mm.
so deep. Like, you helped me realize like I don't need alcohol to have fun. Like we were having fun to like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, have wonderful conversations. Where usually I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I would have to be drunk, and then we have those type of
Mm.
conversations. So
Yeah.
you are just like your heart is so expansive. You're an inspiration. You're a go for it individual. And you're just a loving human being. So I just want to acknowledge you for the podcast, for the platform that you give for myself and the space for others. I mean, you've had some phenomenal guests, and I look forward to like the next iteration. I'm happy to be, the second appearance on this, and I hope to see you big as Lewis Howe, where Chris leaves there for like 19 times. So as you blow up and get big, maybe I can be on your podcast 19 times.
Yes.
But I'm excited for your journey as well.
So who's Chris Lee and who's Lewis in this
Oh,
in this?
obviously you're Lewis, man. I'm the Chris Lee guy. Like,
All right.
you have like 2 million, followers, and you're blowing up, and I'm just like, hey, you're a shining star. Can I go into your
Uh,
coattails as you shine through the stars?
that's awesome. Thank you for the acknowledgement. Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
it's interesting to see that, right? Because as I see different like the guests grow, and Jesse Rothstein, Jaron Kenny, like all these people that, and Anthony Linder, like have they grown and gone to the next chapters of their career. It's just cool to see how everyone's always growing, and it lifts everyone's lifting each other up, right? So it's just
Absolutely.
awesome to be a part of that, this amazing community.
Cool. Fantastic.
All
Thank you so
right.
much, Davidson.
Take care.
All right. Until the next one. Appreciate. Love you, brother.